Daniel Harper here. Something significant just happened in the Arctic, and most people missed it. While headlines focused on rhetoric about Greenland and sovereignty, a quieter development unfolded at the Munich Security Conference. Canada, Denmark, and Greenland deepened their Arctic defense cooperation. No dramatic press conference, no breaking news sirens, just signatures and a signal. In geopolitics, the most consequential shifts don't always come from threats. They come from who chooses to work together and who isn't in the room. Tonight we're breaking down why Greenland matters so much, how Arctic alliances are evolving, and what this could mean for American influence in the high north. If you value serious geopolitical analysis without the noise, hit that like button and subscribe, because the Arctic isn't just ice anymore. It's strategy. Let's get into it. 1 month ago, Trump threatened to take Greenland by force. Today, Greenland just signed a defense pact with Canada, and the United States was not even in the room. Munich Security Conference. While Trump was still dealing with the fallout from his annexation threats, Canada's defense minister walked into a signing ceremony with Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. Joint Arctic surveillance, coordinated military operations, intelligence sharing. 4 countries signed. The United States was not invited. This is not just a defense agreement. This is Trump losing control of the Arctic in real time. And it happened because his threats pushed Greenland directly into Canada's arms. The agreement was signed, what just happened, on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. The same conference where European leaders spent the week discussing how to respond to American unpredictability. 4 defense ministers, Canada, Denmark, Faroe Islands, Greenland, all standing together. 4 signatures, 1 message. The Arctic is secure, and we will keep it that way. The Memorandum of Understanding covers defense innovation, industrial cooperation, mutual logistics support, personnel training, exercises, and education. It formalizes intelligence sharing between Canada and Denmark on Arctic surveillance. It creates a framework for joint operations in the high north, and it explicitly includes Greenland and the Faroe Islands as full participants. Timing matters here. Trump escalated his Greenland annexation threats throughout January. He called ownership of Greenland an absolute necessity. He refused to rule out military force. He suggested the United States needed Greenland for national security. Denmark's Prime Minister Ma Frederiksen responded by saying any attempt to use force would end the NATO alliance. 1 month later, Canada and Denmark signed this agreement, not as a response to Trump, as a signal that Arctic security will be managed by Arctic nations, not by Washington making demands from thousands of miles away. Canada also opened a consulate in Nuuk, Greenland's capital, this week. The consulate was planned before Trump's return to office, but it has become a symbol. Canada is investing in Greenland, building diplomatic presence, strengthening ties. While Trump threatens annexation, Canada offers partnership. But this is about much more than a defense agreement. This is about something Trump desperately wants to control, and he just lost it completely. Let me show you. Greenland. Why Greenland matters so much is not just an island. It is the key to Arctic control. And whoever controls the Arctic controls the future of global shipping, resource extraction, and military positioning for the 21st century. Start with geography. Greenland sits between North America and Europe. It controls access to the Northwest Passage, the shipping route through the Arctic that climate change is making navigable for the first time in human history. Ships using the Northwest Passage cut 7 days off the journey between Asia and Europe, compared to routes through the Suez or Panama canals. That is billions of dollars in shipping costs, and Greenland sits at the entrance. Then there are resources. Greenland has massive deposits of rare earth elements, lithium, cobalt, nickel, rare earths critical for batteries, electronics, Semiconductors, military technology. China currently controls 60% of global rare earth production. The United States needs alternatives. Greenland is one of the few places on Earth with deposits large enough to matter. Oil and gas reserves exist offshore, not yet economically viable to extract in most areas. But as Arctic ice melts and drilling technology improves, Greenland's waters could become a major energy source. Whoever has influence in Greenland has first access to those resources. Military positioning is the other factor. Greenland hosts Thule Air Base, one of the most important American military installations in the world. Early warning radar systems, space tracking, missile detection. Thule monitors Russian and Chinese activity in the Arctic. The United States built the base in 1951 under an agreement with Denmark. That agreement is still in place, but Trump wants more. He wants ownership, control, permanent American presence, not subject to Danish approval. Russia and China are both expanding Arctic operations. Russia has reopened Soviet-era military bases along its Arctic coast. China has declared itself a near-Arctic nation and is investing heavily in Arctic shipping routes and resource extraction. The competition for Arctic dominance is intensifying, and Greenland is the strategic center of that competition. Trump understands this. That is why he offered to buy Greenland in 2019. Denmark refused. That is why he has renewed annexation threats. Now he sees Greenland as essential to American strategic interests, and he sees Denmark as an obstacle. What Trump did not anticipate is that threatening Denmark would push Greenland toward Canada instead. So with all this value, you would think America would be securing its influence. Instead, Trump's threats just pushed Greenland away. Here is how Trump's strategy backfired, exactly how Trump made 3 critical mistakes, and each one made the situation worse. Mistake number 1. Treating Greenland as American property instead of a self-governing territory with its own political leadership. Trump's rhetoric framed Greenland as something the United States could simply take. He talked about buying it. He talked about annexation. He talked about military force. At no point did he engage with Greenland's government as an equal partner. Greenland has home rule. It controls its own domestic affairs. Foreign policy and defense are handled by Denmark, but Greenland's government has significant autonomy. The population is 56,000 people, mostly Inuit. They have their own parliament, their own prime minister, their own views on sovereignty. When Trump suggested the United States could take Greenland, Greenland's leadership responded clearly. Greenland is not for sale. Greenland will decide its own future, and that future does not include becoming American territory. Mistake number 2. Publicly threatening military force against a NATO ally. Trump said he would not rule out using force to take Greenland. That statement sent shockwaves through Europe. Denmark is a founding member of NATO. An attack on Denmark is an attack on all NATO members under Article 5. Trump threatening to use force against Denmark raised the question, is the United States still committed to NATO? Denmark's prime minister said explicitly that any use of force would end the alliance. French President Emmanuel Macron used the Munich Security Conference to talk about Europe needing to defend its own interests. The political fallout from Trump's threats is still reverberating. European leaders now openly discuss what security looks like if the United States is unreliable. Mistake number 3. Ignoring Canada. Greenland and Canada share a 3,000-kilometer maritime border. The Inuit populations in Greenland and northern Canada have cultural and historical ties. Canada has Arctic expertise, infrastructure, military capability, diplomatic relationships throughout the region. If the United States wanted to strengthen its position in Greenland, working with Canada would have been the smart play. Instead, Trump focused entirely on Denmark and Greenland. He ignored Ottawa, and that gave Carney an opening. January 7th, Trump calls Greenland an absolute necessity. January 20th, Trump refuses to rule out military force. February 14th, Canada and Denmark sign a defense pact that explicitly includes Greenland. Without the United States, without American input, without Washington having any say. Trump wanted control. He got exclusion. And the agreement Canada signed creates a framework for Arctic cooperation that makes American participation optional instead of essential. While Trump was threatening Denmark, Carney was already in Munich penning. What he signed changes everything. That spirit of cooperation, Carney's Arctic strategy, now extends to defense. The Memorandum of Understanding signed in Munich formalizes what Canada and Denmark have been doing informally for years. Intelligence sharing on ship movements through the Northwest Passage, coordination on search and rescue operations, joint exercises in Arctic conditions, training programs for personnel operating in extreme cold. But the agreement also creates new frameworks. Defense innovation cooperation means Canadian and Danish companies can work together on Arctic-specific military technology. Mutual logistics support means Canadian forces can use Danish facilities in Greenland, and Denmark can use Canadian Arctic bases. Personnel exchanges mean officers train together and build relationships that make joint operations seamless. This matters because Arctic security is not theoretical. Russian activity in the region is increasing. Chinese research vessels and icebreakers are operating in areas they have never accessed before. Climate change is opening new shipping routes and making resource extraction economically viable in places that were previously inaccessible. The Arctic is becoming contested space, and Canada is building the partnerships needed to defend Canadian interests without depending entirely on the United States. The pattern is visible across multiple sectors. Canada signed the Security Action for Europe Defence Procurement Agreement that gives Canada access to European weapons development and manufacturing. Canada can build submarines with France and Germany instead of buying American. Canada signed trade agreements with China that reduce dependence on American markets. Canada is building the Gordie Howe bridge to break the Morant family's monopoly on Detroit-Windsor trade. Every move follows the same logic. Build alternatives that make American cooperation valuable, but not essential. And the Denmark Defense Pact fits perfectly into that framework. Greenland benefits too. The agreement gives Greenland access to Canadian Arctic expertise without going through Washington. If Greenland wants to develop its own Coast Guard capability, Canada can help. If Greenland needs search and rescue infrastructure, Canada has experience building and operating it in similar conditions. If Greenland wants to assert more control over its own territory, partnership with Canada offers a path that does not require choosing between Denmark and the United States. The Inuit connection strengthens this. Greenland's population is 88% Inuit. Northern Canada has large Inuit communities. Cultural ties exist that do not depend on government policy. Those ties create trust, and trust makes cooperation easier. Canada opened the Nuuk consulate this week. The consulate will have a defense attaché. That attaches will work directly with Greenland's government on security matters, not through Copenhagen, not through Washington directly. That is a significant shift in how Arctic diplomacy works, and it happened because Trump's threats made Greenland receptive to alternatives. This brings us to what happens next, because this agreement is not an endpoint, it is a beginning. What this means for the future. This does not mean NATO is splitting. It means NATO is becoming less dependent on the United States for Arctic operations. If Trump decides American forces should pull back from European commitments, Canada and Denmark can maintain Arctic security without them. That capability did not exist before. It exists now. Second, Greenland is moving toward greater autonomy, not independence immediately, but more control over its own affairs. The Defense Pact gives Greenland's government direct input into security decisions that affect Greenlandic territory. That is new. Previously, Security decisions were made by Denmark with American input. Now, Greenland has a seat at the table, and that seat is formalized in an international agreement. As Greenland gains more autonomy, the relationship with the United States becomes more complicated. Thule Air Base operates under the 1951 agreement between the United States and Denmark. If Greenland becomes fully independent, that agreement would need to be renegotiated. The United States would be dealing with a Greenlandic government that just signed a defense pact with Canada, a government that Trump threatened with annexation. That negotiation would not favor Washington. Third, China and Russia are watching. Both countries have been trying to increase their Arctic presence. Both face opposition from NATO members. The Canada-Denmark Pact demonstrates that Arctic nations are coordinating to defend their interests. That makes Chinese and Russian expansion harder, but it also shows that coordination is happening without American leadership. If the United States is seen as unreliable, China and Russia might calculate that European and Canadian resolve is weaker without American backing. Whether that calculation is correct remains to be seen, but the fact that it is being made at all represents a shift. For 70 years, American power in the Arctic was assumed. Now it is being tested. Fourth, the agreement creates momentum for more partnerships. Canada and Denmark signed this in Munich, the same conference where Canada finalized its entry into the European Security Action for Europe program. The same conference where European leaders discussed building defense capabilities that do not depend on the United States. The same conference where transatlantic relations were described as being under extraordinary strain. Canada is not choosing Europe over the United States. Canada is building relationships that make Canadian security less dependent on any single partner. And the Denmark Pact is a perfect example. If the United States remains a reliable ally, the agreement strengthens NATO by improving coordination between members. If the United States becomes unreliable, the agreement provides Canada with alternatives. This brings us back to where we started. Trump wanted Greenland. He threatened annexation. He refused to rule out force, and he pushed Greenland directly into a defense partnership with Canada that excludes the United States entirely. This is what happens next happens when threats replace diplomacy. Trump saw Greenland as something the United States could take. Carney saw Greenland as a partner Canada could work with. Trump demanded. Carney cooperated. Trump threatened force. Canada offered partnership. The result is exactly what Trump did not want. An Arctic security framework led by Canada and Denmark. Greenland with more autonomy and more options. Europe building defense capabilities that function without American leadership. And the United States watching from the outside. The Canada-Denmark Defense Pact is not the biggest agreement signed this year. It is not the most expensive. It does not involve the most personnel or the most equipment, but it is the clearest example of how Trump's strategy is backfiring. Every threat pushes Canada to build alternatives. Every demand accelerates partnerships that reduce Canadian dependence on the United States. Every attempt to assert American control produces exactly the opposite result. More independence, more autonomy, more cooperation with easy countries that are not the United States. Trump wanted Greenland. He got isolation instead. One pact, 1 month, total Arctic realignment, Canada and Denmark inside, America locked out. Pattern complete. If you want more analysis on how geopolitics is shifting, subscribe to stay informed on the stories that truly matter.